Yeah.
And let's talk about the linebacker position for the Buffalo Bills right now. Currently on the roster, Matt Milano is your strong side backer. Mike linebacker is currently a competition, if the season were to start tomorrow, between Terrell Bernard and Tyrell Dodson. Then you have depth pieces, or a depth piece in Balon Spector, and a special teams only player in Tyler Matakevich. Right. My biggest concern here, because everyone in Bills Mafia loves Jack Campbell right now. I look at this draft and it's not a good draft for linebackers. It's not. It is Jack Campbell, and then it is Drew Sanders, and then it is Cam Jones, who's like a fringe late 3, early day 4 guy. That's what we're talking about in terms of pure mics. You can throw in the wild cards of Trenton Simpson, Dayon Henley, Demarion Overshown from Texas, Dorian Williams from you can throw those wild cards in there, but those are more Terrell Bernard, Matt Milano, and less true mics. When Brandon Beane came out and said Matt Milano's not playing Mike, we're not playing positionless linebacker. So maybe he was being coy and it will be positionless. Trent Simpson seems like the kind of guy the Bills would love, but Trenton Simpson struggled last year as a stack linebacker. His best year came from 2 years ago when he played a safety nickel weak side linebacker hybrid type of role. Ivan Pace and Noah Sewell are in there as well. Again, we're going to talk about all of them tonight. I think some of them have their flaws as well, but my biggest issue is Jack Campbell. If you don't get him at 27, he might not be there at 59. So this is my biggest issue with free agency so far. The Bills have pigeonholed themselves in a way that they pigeonholed themselves last year with Kyer Elam. And last year with Kyer Elam, it wasn't a coincidence the Chiefs traded up in front of the Bills to take Trent McDuffie. The Pittsburgh Steelers are in front of us right now because they were worse team than us. I don't think they're going to take a guy like Jack Campbell in the first round, but they're also ahead of us twice in the second round. And the Pittsburgh Steelers are pretty bad at middle linebacker as well, losing Devin Bush, Miles Jack, and not replacing those guys. So Pittsburgh's just as bad off at linebacker as us. It's a concern. The Bills, I think, have maybe pigeonholed themselves a little bit. So what are your thoughts on where we go from here at linebacker?
And I think they pigeonholed themselves worse than they did last year, right? Because think about all the corners we talked about last year: Kyer Elam, Roger McCreary, Kyler Gordon. McCreary and Gordon were picked after the Bills picked, right? So they had options at corner.
Yeah.
There's not a ton of options at middle linebacker for pick 27 outside of Jack Campbell, and that's really going to be a potential issue for the Bills if they decide that is a priority position for them. It really shows you how much of a freak of nature Tremaine Edmunds was with that size and speed that he had at that Mike spot. Like, you don't find guys like that. Like, guys like that are getting picked in the top, 15, 20, like Tremaine Edmunds did. And so, like, outside of Jack Campbell, you don't feel great about sitting around waiting till round 2 for some of these other guys. Now, there are other guys that you could get later in the draft, but like, what are they going to bring you more than a guy like Terrell Dodson or Balon Spector or Terrell Bernard is? And then you've potentially not wasted, but invested a couple picks at the linebacker spot, and you're not really sure what you want to do with it. So for me, if I'm the Bills, what I'm doing now is I am, we've got about a little over a month till the draft. The middle linebacker market right now is essentially pretty thin, right? There's Bobby Wagner's, a few other guys.
Anthony Walker Jr., he's visiting the Commanders, but
it's like at this point, because the Bills didn't jump on Levante David, obviously they didn't re-sign Tremaine. Like, there's not a ton of incentive, I guess, for the Bills to rush right now into kind of signing a middle linebacker. Now, they could kind of have their hand, like Beane could have his hand on the phone of, a guy, one of these guys' agents come draft time. And if they don't get their guy, let's say Jack Campbell's not there and they don't pick him, like, they could be on speed dial one of these vets. But man, it's a tough spot right now. And that's why I put it as my number one need, not just because of the draft, but just that in combination with how important this position really is to the Bills defense, or it has been at least.
And Charles G comes in the great point. He's like, I think Bills fans are overreacting to replacing Edmunds. There's nobody to replace him. 100%. There's nobody to replace him. And that's why Brandon Beane's comments were concerning, because I was not stressed. I was not, because I thought that Matt Milano could. And again, when I said like Matt Milano to middle linebacker or Mike Milano, when I was like saying those things, I didn't mean that as in like an every down circumstance. Like he is 100% replacing Tremaine Edmunds. But if you go to this sort of like positionless approach where guys are moving around, you're essentially like bringing a third safety onto the field and having one type of linebacker. That brings guys like Deion Henley into the equation. That brings guys like Trenton Simpson into the equation. That brings guys like Demarion Overshown into the equation. That brings free agent guys like Quan Alexander into the equation, free agent guys like Deion Jones. Like it brings more dudes into the equation. But if you are looking to straight up just replace Tremaine Edmunds and what he does, it's Jack Campbell and Drew Sanders. Like that's it in this draft. So you are banking so much on one of those two dudes being available. And I don't think, maybe we're wrong, because like Chad Muma, we thought he was going to go earlier last year than he did, and he went later. But I look at the Pittsburgh Steelers, and this could all very well work out, right? Like this could all be fine 2 months from now. And all this panicking was for nothing. But this is going to be a long 2 months, especially for me. And I know it probably will be for you, and it will be for most fans. Until we see a name, we're going to be super just stressed out and anxious about what the Buffalo Bills decide to do. Now, Jack Campbell, again, is he the athlete Tremaine Edmunds is? Not quite. Can he 100% do what Tremaine Edmunds did? Probably not. Is he a rookie going to take his lumps? 100%. But he's the guy who's most closely going to fill the Tremaine Edmunds role. Drew Sanders, boy, you are betting a ton. You are betting a ton on him developing and him developing quickly, because this is a former edge rusher who moved to off ball just last season. You can tell when he's fitting the run, he misses a ton of tackles at the line of scrimmage. Like, you think some of the Bills linebackers and some of the Bills tackling issues are bad on running backs at the line of scrimmage? Look at some of the Drew Sanders lowlights. They're not pretty. And not to mention, as a former edge player, he still does struggle a little bit, especially in man-to-man coverage and matching up with guys because he's a little stiff. But he's the freakiest of the athletes. He's this year's Troy Anderson. If you're the Buffalo Bills, like, and you're looking to replace Tremaine Edmunds, these are the only two left: free agency or the draft. And that's what's so scary.
Yeah, it is. And like, you made a really nice like comparison of those two guys, right? Jack Campbell is the guy that football IQ, processing instincts, like he's there, right? He is the guy that if you want day one to come in and like not have as much pressure on the dude mentally, that's the guy. But athletically, he did test well, so I'm not going to take that away from him. But Drew Sanders is the freak ceiling athlete that could be your ball of clay, could be your Tariq Woolen, if you will, of last year at the corner position, who look at what he did at corner for Seattle. I'm not saying that's going to be the case for Drew Sanders, but if you are betting on traits, which the Bills have done, by the way, with guys like Rousseau, with guys like Spencer Brown, like they've bet first round picks on traits in a guy like Rousseau who had 1 year production at the college level. And it wasn't even his most recent season, as we know, he sat out for a year, but Drew Sanders would be the guy. Now, I personally do believe that Drew Sanders will be available when the Bills pick. And so it comes down to whether they're willing to pull the trigger on a guy like that at the late first round to be that heir apparent to Tremaine Edmunds. So I'm not going to be mad if that's the pick. In fact, I'd be kind of excited about it, but it's a risk. There is definitely a risk involved that, at least in year one, there's going to be very unreasonable expectations on that guy's shoulders. And it's going to be maybe a bit unfair to him, honestly.
Kenny Regal comes in and says, I'm not stressed out. I like Spector and thinks he can play if given a shot. I like Balon Spector too, especially what I like from him in the preseason. But again, if you are looking at, and again, like Sean McDermott could just be hiding some creativity and some changes to the scheme that we're just not aware of. So again, this is just me in panic mode, because it's like, you know, it's what month is it? March? It's March, right? And we're ways away from seeing those changes on the field or seeing, you know, what the Bills' plan is. So like that unknown is you guys know me. I'm a panicker. I stress out. I have massive anxiety. This is what I'm anxious about right now. You look at Balon Spector, 6'1", 233, 31.5-inch arms. He's not going to have that reach in the middle of the field. He's not going to impact the middle of the field, especially in the passing game, like Tremaine Edmunds did. Somebody says, you guys don't like Ivan Pace Jr.
No, we do.
I love
We do like him.
Ivan Pace
Not in the
Jr.
first round, though.
Not in the first round, and not to replace Tremaine Edmunds. And like, to me, I would draft Ivan Pace Jr. and I would designate him as a pass rusher. Like I wouldn't even bother using him that much as a linebacker. Obviously, he's got that versatility, but I think Ivan Pace is more like a Lorenzo Alexander type, like for a team that uses 3 linebackers, or he's a guy who just is sort of like a jack of all trades. Like occasionally he's a linebacker, occasionally he's a pass rusher. He's a special teams maven. But like if you're trying to replace Tremaine Edmunds, right? That giant behemoth, massive man who throws off the passing game in the middle of the football field. Ivan Pace Jr. is 5'10.5". He's got 30 and 1/4 inch arms, right? The best comp I've seen for him, or I shouldn't even say the best comp, but the most frequent comp I've seen for Ivan Pace Jr. has been Denzel Perryman. When we look at Denzel Perryman in free agency, what do we say about Denzel Perryman? Oh, he's that old school traditional first and second down linebacker. That's not what the Buffalo Bills are looking for. So Ivan Pace Jr., despite the fact that he's a much better pass rusher and I think could be used more creatively than a guy like Denzel Perryman, I'm just not seeing that as a replacement for a Tremaine Edmunds. If the Bills take him, I would love it. But I don't mean to sound like a jerk when I say this, I question whether Sean McDermott is creative enough to use Ivan Pace Jr. properly. Like, I selfishly want the Cowboys to draft him because I've called him Baby Micah. Like the way that he rushes the passer, I just love watching him play football and get after the quarterback. I think a guy like Dan Quinn could turn him into an absolute monster. But for him, it's going to be about fit. And I just don't know if Buffalo's a fit.
It's going to be about fit. And we talked a little bit about how edge rusher is a need for this team. So could the Bills get a little creative and sort of have a dual role in mind for a guy like Pace? I mean, that's the thing where you kind of look at resource allocation. You have 6 draft picks. You don't have a ton. You still got a lot of holes potentially on the defensive side of the ball. That's a guy that you can bring in and potentially figure out where he best fits as you go throughout the summer and throughout camp. Maybe through camp, he shows better as an edge rusher. Maybe that's where and you kind of solve a problem by taking a pretty versatile player. But you're right. It comes down to the coaching staff and what fit and what scheme they want to kind of put this guy in. And the Bills defense, while it has been good statistically, has not been the most creative, has not been the most exotic. And obviously that might change now with Sean McDermott having more of a direct say in it. You know, no defensive coordinator, he's going to be the guy calling the plays. So we'll see about a guy like that. Maybe he becomes more of an option, or at least a option that wouldn't have otherwise been in the past.
Yeah. Looking over too, I just want to throw some names out there. We're going to talk about them more during draft season, but there are some other guys that I like. The Buffalo Bills have spoken to at the Combine D Winners and at the Senior Bowl. They talked to Mohamed Diabate from Utah. Again, those are guys where it's like they're technically like middle linebackers, but they look more Milano-y and Bernardi than they do like sort of that traditional Tremaine Edmunds. So those are some guys that I like as well. Obviously, 2 NC State guys that I really like are Drake Thomas and Isaiah Moore. I know the Patriots really loved Isaiah Moore at the Senior Bowl. He could be a little bit of a sleeper, but those are guys that are like depth linebackers, special teamers, kind of like in the Balon Spector mold.
Drake Thomas, to me, he's like, if you want a young AJ Klein, like that's to me what he is. Like, he is a very good run defender. He was NC State's Defensive Player of the Year in 2021. But his length, and he doesn't have long arms. He's got short arms. He's not going to be great in pass coverage, but he's a good run defender. So
a new Matakevich, if you're looking for a new Matakevich, maybe.
Yeah, maybe so. But I do I'm obviously going to support my NC State guys. So,
but it'll be interesting too, because like if the Bills are willing to go positionless at linebacker, Trenton Simpson is now in play. Deion Henley is in play. DeMarvion Overshawn is in play. Yeah. Dorian Williams is in. Those guys are in play if the Buffalo Bills are willing to go positionless. But again, reading the tea leaves from Brandon Beane doesn't really. I don't know if the Bills are going to be willing to go there. So.